back down and shut your trap. It's time for
Keeping It Sports with M3.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Well, I'll need some beer.
Are you ready?
You have to ask me nicely.
Come on now, don't be bashful.
Are you ready? Are you ready for
Place for the best sports talk and news surrounding each week.
I can prove it with my usual flawless logic.
Hey man, this time we're gonna do it my way.
What's your name again?
And now, here's your host, M3, Mike Rosansky. Coming to you from Cherry Hill, New Jersey. It's time for Keeping It Sports with M3, powered by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. Good afternoon, everyone. I am, of course, your host, Mike M3 Rosansky, coming to you here on this Monday, the 8th day of June. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all off to a great start in your week, whatever it is you may be doing at this moment. Thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your week, whether you're watching me live on YouTube or you just couldn't stand the sight of me and decide to wait till Tuesday and listen to the podcast version. Whatever way it is that you're intaking Keeping It Sports with M3 right now, I thank you and I greatly appreciate you. Remember to always spread the word on all the places that you can find this podcast. There's links up on all of my social media channels, whether it be on Instagram at Keeping It Sports with M3. There's an underscore in between each of those words. Also find the links to this on my personal Instagram page, Mike M3 Rosansky. Find me on X at Keeping It Sports. Find the Facebook page for Keeping It Sports with M3, as well as you can go on the website or app known as Linktree and type in Keeping It Sports with M3 as well as M3 Rosansky, and you will find a page that I have specifically set up, and it has a link to all of the podcast platforms that this podcast is available on, as well as a link to our YouTube channel that you can follow along with each and every single week. So please, as always, as I say all the time, spread the word, and I thank you and appreciate you all for any of the support that I get in doing this podcast each and every single week. Now, it's almost a pinch me kind of moment because we've got the NBA Finals going on right now. And I was very kind of hesitant to make a pick. This is one of those finals where I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't have a team that I'm rooting for or against. I'm just rooting for good basketball games, rooting for them to keep me entertained, and rooting for a 7-game series. Well, we sit here on this Monday afternoon, and it doesn't feel like right now I'm getting my wish of a 7-game series. Hell, by the time that most of you either watch or listen or however you're digesting this podcast, by the time most of you hear my words, this series might be pretty much over. Because we sit here today, and the New York Knicks winning streak has continued on to 13 as they have taken a 2-0 lead in this series over the San Antonio Spurs. And it's not that the Spurs have been bad or just god awful. I mean, there's been some things about the Spurs that you can heavily criticize, heavily critique, some decision making that not just the players have made, but head coach Mitch Johnson has made that we'll get to. But I think if you criticize the Spurs, you're taking away from what is the real story here. And that is the Knicks momentum train that keeps on rolling along, that looks like an unstoppable freight train right now. And when you think about this, yeah, Jalen Brunson has put up good numbers in these games. He's been the closer in these games. But the real star of this series so far for the Knicks has been Karl Anthony Towns on multiple fronts, whether it be him realizing the moment and realizing when the team needs a little bit of a pick-me-up, whether it be down by 14 in the second half and he scoring most of his points in that third quarter to get them back into this game, or just the all-out physical assault he has put on Victor Wembanyama. Victor Wembanyama has not had to face this throughout the postseason. He's faced big men who are either not big in size, only big in height, or guys that are afraid of him, like Chet Holmgren was in the previous series. He hasn't faced a big man like Karl Anthony Towns, who may be, 5 inches shorter than him, but probably weighs more than him, probably stronger than him. And he's forced Wembanyama to stay out of the paint, to not have much of a post game, to settle for a lot of shots from the perimeter with him not in the paint. That's allowed opportunities for teammates such as Josh Hart, who didn't shoot the ball well in either games 1 or 2, but you felt his impact, especially in game 1, where he was denying the Spurs from getting any second chance opportunities. He had 15 rebounds, 13 on defense. The Spurs only had 14 offensive rebounds amongst themselves through this game. So Towns, for all of the crap that he has gotten throughout this year, all of the criticism, including from yours truly, will it be some of the stupid fouls that he takes, some of the complaining that has been done toward referees on the court. I think there's a legitimate argument to be made right now that he's been the MVP of this series so far for the Knicks. And if this continues on this pace, he should be the one that's granted that honor. Not to say Brunson has been bad. Brunson has had the clutch shots in the clutch moments, whether it be having 13 points in the fourth quarter in game 1, or having the go-ahead shot in game 2 after Wemby had one of the more mind-boggling turnovers that you're ever going to see. And to think, there was a lot of concern. There was a lot of nerves by Knicks fans. There's no way you can't say that you were a little bit concerned when early in game 1, he got his knee bumped into by Harrison Barnes and was limping off the court, went to the locker room for a few minutes. Then he comes back and almost instantly he has that situation where he goes up for a shot, comes down on Luke Cornett's foot, rolled his ankle, and you're thinking, is this guy going to be hobbled all series long? Is this just after all of the positive vibes, good moments that we've had? Is it going to all come crashing down in the NBA Finals? But what's so great about this Knicks team is even when Brunson struggles on the onset, even when Towns is largely quiet until you get to the third quarter in game 1, you've got other guys on this team that can pick things up and carry momentum or keep the team within striking distance until your two big dogs truly get going. Whether it be Anunoby, whether it be Hart, Bridges, you've seen his confidence grow as this postseason gone along. Even when Hart's having a bad shooting night in game 2, you can turn to a guy like Landry Shamet coming off the bench. He's carried over a lot of the momentum that he had in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Cavaliers and continued to not be afraid to take the big shot when it called for it. McBride's had some big shots in some big moments throughout this series. Every everybody has stepped up and played a role in this. The big credit you give to in that is Mike Brown. Because, yeah, all of us were heavily critical when around a year ago at this time, Tom Thibodeau was fired. In fact, I believe game 1 was the 1-year anniversary of Tom Thibodeau's firing. Even though he had gotten the Knicks to a certain point, biggest criticism you always had of him is that he ran your starting 5 and his 7-8 man rotation right into the ground. Whereas Mike Brown developed his bench. He developed his entire roster and had guys ready where even if they're not playing much, they know that their number can get called on at any time and step up and have a big moment for you. Like, there's guys that we have barely seen throughout this series. Take a guy like Jordan Clarkson. You watch, if something went awry in game 3 tonight and either Hart or Anunoby are having a bad shooting night or Bridges having a bad shooting night, you could maybe turn to Clarkson. All of a sudden, he out of nowhere could give you a quiet but effective 10 points to stem the tide until, as I said, your top dogs take over the game. And they've been picking their spots. They've been picking their moments, but everybody on this team has had their moments. I don't know whether you want to attribute this to the Spurs being a young team or it being their first time here, because for the Knicks, yeah, they're veteran laced. Yeah, they've got a lot of guys that are at minimum 5 to 6 years deep into their careers. Some guys as many as 8 or 9 years. Hell, Towns been at this over a decade. But no one on that Knicks team has been to an NBA Finals. Hell, the only guy in this series that has any real NBA Finals experience is Harrison Barnes. I just think it's the moment catching up to them just a little bit as far as them not having a counterattack to Wembanyama not being a presence in the paint with Towns being so physical with them. Mitch Johnson not reading the room when it comes to his roster. And we all saw it. Game 1, you're watching Dylan Harper come out there and he's shooting the ball phenomenally for the first 3 quarters of this game. Barely sniffs the court in the 4th quarter because he was so incensed with having De'Aaron Fox out there, even though De'Aaron Fox is having an awful shooting night. Sometimes you've got to be able to look a veteran in the face and be like, hey, it's just not your night. This kid is the one that's carrying the day for us. This guy is a big part on why we have been having a lead throughout this game. And I just look at the Spurs and I feel like if they're not having Wemby dominate inside, then their only option has been to resort to shooting a lot of 3-pointers. That hasn't really been carrying the day. I mean, you look at, they only shot, about 37% from 3 in game 2, with Wemby being very quiet in the first half. The Knicks were able to jump out to a big lead. Now, they were able to rally, tie this game up late in the 4th quarter, but never had that final blow, never had that moment where you look at it and say, all right, we're going to make a series of this. We're going to go back to Madison Square Garden tied up at 1 apiece. Even despite the unnecessary chaos that is surrounding Madison Square Garden tonight, with the president attending and the mayor being there, and unless you have a ticket to the game or have some kind of credential reason to be in or around Madison Square Garden, they've shut the surrounding area there down within like 3 blocks of the Garden tonight. So it's not going to be with all of the wild watch parties that you normally see. But I still expect that building to be raucous and loud at a level that we have not heard for a very, very long time. Something that Knicks fans have long been waiting for. The city has long been waiting for. And quite frankly, they've earned and deserved. And I don't say that lightly. Even as someone who's impartial, someone who's not a Knicks fan, you think about the ugly history that this team has had since their last finals appearance in 1999. How there was not a lot to be happy or celebrate when it comes to being a Knicks fan. Yet they still loaded that building up on most nights, even despite some of the on-court chaos with some of the bad players that were on those teams, or over-the-hill players that were brought on through bad trades made by Isaiah Thomas and Phil Jackson when they were running things. The short surge that was the Carmelo Anthony era, but it really didn't have any long-lasting impact. Some of the bad draft picks they've had, the meddling by James Dolan, until finally you brought people in there who knew what the hell they were doing, created such a great vibe to where Dolan just stayed the hell out of the way. Think about this. This isn't a team full of number 1 draft picks. This isn't a team where the Knicks got lucky in the draft lottery. Yeah, you had Towns, who was a first overall pick at one point, but that was with the Minnesota Timberwolves. You got him through a trade, and the rest of these guys were largely cast-offs from other organizations. You know, Josh Hart played for 4 or 5 other teams before becoming a Knick. Jalen Brunson, the Mavericks clearly did not know what they had in him, and he was a second-round draft pick. Mikal Bridges was coming off the bench for the Phoenix Suns and then went to the Brooklyn Nets, put up good numbers for a year and a half, but people thought he was mostly a looter and a riot. OG Anunoby, not a lot of people, unless you're a true diehard fan of the game, even realize who he was because he was playing up in Canada for the Raptors. And then they found the right pieces to fill in around that. So this team has been put together very wisely, put together very smartly by the people in charge of things here. And is a team that Knicks fans everywhere can be very proud of and be very happy of. Listen, you're 2 wins away now. You're 2 sets of 48 minutes away from doing something you haven't done in 53 years. You have every right to be boastful, to celebrate, to be loud, to cheer this on. And I can only hope, for you guys' sake and for the sake of my siblings who are Knicks fans, especially my brother Joe and my sister Elizabeth, who's coming off of celebrating her birthday yesterday. I can only hope that you guys get this done at Madison Square Garden. Yeah, you'll take a title any way you can get it, but it would be so much more sweeter, so much more special if that moment can happen, whether it be at Game 4 this coming Wednesday, or heaven forbid you have to come back next week and play a Game 6 a week from tomorrow night at the Garden. I would really, really, even as a non-Knicks fan, like to see this get done at the Garden, because you will see then a celebration in this city unlike anything we've ever seen before, and a moment that would be truly, truly special to witness. All right, a lot more I want to get to throughout this podcast. Can give you some thoughts on some of the moves that could be coming in the off season, including one that is rumored to be coming up here very soon, or speculated to be coming up very soon in the NBA off season. Injury for the Yankees that really no one should be surprised about, but is going to have a big impact on their summer, mixing some football as well. So there's a lot I want to get to throughout the remainder of this podcast. Glad you could join me once again this week. And like I tell you each and every single week at this time, please sit back, relax, help put your feet up if you feel like it, and continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
Now, while I am happy for Knicks fans, and I said before you should not have to apologize about anything. Yeah, the playoffs have broken your way, getting largely home court advantage throughout this postseason, not having to face the Boston Celtics or the Detroit Pistons, especially the Pistons who were a pain in the ass for you to deal with throughout this season. And you've got the number 2 seed in the Western Conference rather than the defending NBA champions, the Oklahoma City Thunder. There's no need to ever apologize about winning a championship. Other than the bubble, there's never been, in my mind, a fake NBA championship. You didn't play anybody that was dealing with some kind of excruciating injury or a depleted roster. No, you were the better team in every one of those series against the Hawks, against the 76ers, against the Cavs, and now against the San Antonio Spurs. So be happy, celebrate, enjoy this moment, a moment that I do believe at the latest next week will result in you holding up the Larry O'Brien trophy as NBA champions. But there is some conduct that you have to adhere to as a fan. We've seen this once again in this series, especially in game 1, where a couple of jackasses want to make the story about themselves. A couple of people out there can't just be happy that their team is winning, that their team is potentially on the precipice of winning an NBA championship. No, they want to make the story about themselves. Whether you have it in the early portion of the fourth quarter, that fan who ran out onto the court trying to take a selfie with Victor Wembanyama in the middle of the game action. You see the surprising look on his face, confusing look on Mitchell Robinson's face as they're standing there near the arc, and this fool comes running on to the court before being taken away by security. And let's face it, he got very fortunate there. That security should have just blitzed him straight off of this planet like they were an NFL linebacker and he was someone carrying the football. There's no reason for that guy to be on the court. I don't care what excuse it is, him trying to take a selfie or if he's claiming he's drunk, whatnot. There's no reason for a fan ever to be on the floor. It almost reminded me, let's go back about 5 years. Remember when the pandemic took place? And about a year into it, that's when they started allowing fans back into the building. It started off with, I think, about 10%. Then it slowly, gradually went up to 25, then up to about 50 before eventually we got to full capacity. And as they started allowing fans back into the building, it seemed like on an every other nightly basis, we were seeing a fan run onto the court or having some kind of interaction or confrontation with a player. Like, people, it is not our right to be at a game or to be sitting there witnessing these great athletes. It's a privilege. You work hard to pay for those tickets to get into these arenas. Don't abuse that privilege. And whether it be this fool who rightfully so has been banned from NBA games for life, or the fans at the end of the game that were heckling Jalen Brunson, and who knows what was said there. Only ones that seemed to know what were said were Brunson and those fans. The microphones from the game action weren't picking up anything they were saying, but clearly they were saying something truly offensive for Brunson to be having constant conversations with referee Scott Foster to direct security their attention, and even have this go as far as the NBA investigate the situation. Listen, I'm all down with heckling. I mean, hell, I was at a Yankee game about a month ago, and the fans in the right field seats all day long were getting on Tyler O'Neill of the Baltimore Orioles. But there's just certain things you don't say. You don't say anything about the player's family or anything in their personal life. You don't make anything race or religion related here with your comments. You could say that the player sucks, or that, hey, they cost you winning a bet on FanDuel, something along those lines. But don't get personal with these players. Yeah, they can do some amazing things that are physical gifts that they were God-given and work hard to maintain. But at the end of the day, they're living, breathing human beings, just like you and I, and should be treated with that kind of respect. Now, once these finals get done and over with, we're going to hit the NBA off season full speed ahead. And we're about 2 weeks away from the NBA draft. In that time frame, you would expect something to come down when it comes to the Giannis Antetokounmpo sweepstakes. You would expect that he will have a new home, new location. Now, whether that be long term or just for next year remains to be seen. But after Giannis, the next thing to drop will be the future of LeBron James. And he, in all likelihood, is going to play next year. The only question remains, where? While the Lakers remain an option, it looks like they're going to expect him to take a big pay cut all the way down to about probably $20 million in order to remain a Laker next year, and for them to continue building the roster around Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves, who they're also looking at giving a long-term contract extension to. So you got to start looking, where could those potential fits be for him outside of LA? And the thing that I've long speculated, if next year is going to indeed be his final season in the league, would he return to Cleveland for a third chapter to wrap things up there? But the problem being, the Cleveland Cavaliers are already above the second apron under the league's collective bargaining agreement, and would only be able to offer him the taxpayers' mid-level exception, which would be around $6.1 million. I don't think he's going to make that severe of a pay cut take, dropping from $52 million all the way down $6 million next season. And then when you take into account here that the Cleveland Cavaliers would have to make some severe roster changes in order to do that, they would probably need to move players like Max Strus or Dean Wade, or find a way to clear the salary of Jared Allen, who's set to make $28 million next season. They would really be tearing their roster apart and having to still figure out a way to get a new restructured deal with James Harden. On top of that, coming close to a decision time when it comes to Donovan Mitchell, as he's got only 2 years remaining on his current contract. Well, recently, longtime reporter Tim Kawakami threw out there an interesting idea about potentially the Golden State Warriors being an ideal spot for him, as they could give him a $15.1 million non-taxpayer mid-level exception. And he would get to do what has long been speculated about, teaming up with Steph Curry. These two, even despite the wars that they've had in the NBA Finals over the years, playing each other 4 consecutive years during that run where Steph got his first 3 of 4 championship rings, they have a great deal of respect for each other. They teamed together on Team USA in the last Olympics. LeBron and Draymond Green, even despite their on-court history, have a very good off-court relationship. We know how glowingly Steve Kerr and LeBron think of each other. The big problem I have with this is that this is very much an aging roster. I mean, you look at it. Steph's up there in his late 30s. Draymond's in his mid-30s. LeBron is 41. You're going to be having at some point next year Jimmy Butler, who's in his late 30s, coming back from a torn ACL. Are you really going to go all in on 1 year with this aging roster? And then, yeah, LeBron James has proven that he can still play. But I'm sure the Warriors, as a franchise, have got to be asking themselves, how do we set ourselves up to win now while Steph Curry's still here? But also put us in a position where when he does eventually retire, we're not just some bottom dweller in the league. The way these new rules are set up when it comes to the draft lottery, you're not going to just be able to tank and hope to get lucky with the ping pong balls anymore. You're not going to be able to suck for a 5 or 6 year span to hope to be great for 15 years after. It's going to be harder to build up a good roster. And when you look at that team, outside of some moments from Podziemski over the last year and a half, they really have not done a great job building up young players around Steph Curry and Draymond Green. So while, yeah, the idea of bringing in LeBron James is interesting, intriguing to see those two pair up, and it would probably be fun to watch, you do have to ask yourselves, is this the best thing for our future? Is this something that we may win next year or be successful next year? But is it really something that sets us up well going forward after the Steph Curry era?
I'll be back.
Now, while the NBA Finals are going on right now, there are other things in the New York sports world to focus on, and that being the New York Yankees, as every Yankee fan was holding their breath for about 3 days as we awaited a diagnosis on Aaron Judge. At first, when the lineup came out last Tuesday night, and giving it an initial glance, I didn't see Aaron Judge's name in there. I didn't make too big a deal of it. Even with the day off on Monday, I figured it was one of those things where it's like, he's played every game this season. Let's just give him a blow here, especially with how he had been struggling. But then when you start hearing that he's going for testing, hearing that his shoulder was balky, then they changed the story after the game and said it was more in the upper rib region and it was affecting his shoulder. Like, that's not great, but maybe it explains the slump he had been in for the last 3 weeks. And he still was top 5 in the American League in home runs. but his batting average had dropped all the way down to about 248. And that's not typical of Aaron Judge. He's more than just a power hitter. He's an all-around great hitter. The guy won the batting title for a reason. But then you really started getting concerned when on Thursday that said that he had went out to a specialist in Dallas to be looked at, a doctor who specializes in thoracic outlet syndrome surgery. And that's a surgery that I had only heard of when it comes to pitchers. You don't hear that from position players like, ooh, are they about to lose Aaron Judge for the season? Now, thankfully, that turned out not to be the case. And the results here, I think, are the best case scenario here, as the imaging revealed a stress fracture on his first rib on his right side. He's going to be shut down from baseball activity for 4 to 6 weeks. So that's right around the range of the All-Star break. Before then, they decide the next steps in his recovery process. I mean, this is not something that he can have surgery on or get some kind of ejection. This is an injury where it's going to fully rely on just rest and healing up. I credit him for wanting to try to play through this, and this happened apparently at the end of April when making a dive attempt in Houston, and then didn't necessarily get helped out much when a week later he was crashing into the wall in a game against the Orioles. And since then it got progressively worse to the point where the pain just was too much even for Aaron Judge. And I respect him trying to play through it, considering you had Stanton on the IL, Max Fried during that time went on the IL. He's trying to champ this out and be the leader that he's always been for this team. But this team is not going anywhere unless you have a fully healthy Aaron Judge in the most important time of the season. Now, got off to a great start, had 16 home runs through the first 43 games, hitting .275. But his last 16 games, he just batted .180 with 1 home run, that walk-off against the Rays. And his OPS was at only .550. And this is a guy that, yes, he's previously had some injury history. Now, the last couple of years, he's kind of quelled that a bit, but he's had fractured ribs during that spring training in 2020 that didn't lead to him missing any time with the season being delayed due to the pandemic. But he still then later that year suffered the right calf strain. We know about the flexor tendon injury he had last year that hindered his throwing in the outfield for a large chunk of that second half. He missed 6 weeks in 2018 due to a fractured right wrist. And then there's the infamous toe injury in 2023 that pretty much debilitated the Yankees season, because when he went down, there were 12 games over 500. And then after that, they collapsed and had their worst season in the last 30-plus seasons, as they barely were over 500 at 82 and 80. It goes without saying, this is an extremely important player for the Yankees. And you look at, in the last 8 years when they haven't had Aaron Judge, they're 132 and 121. Their best success in the time without him was the 2 months he had the oblique injury in 2019, where they went 43 and 18. But since 2020, they're 8 games under 500 when he's not in the lineup, whereas they're 138 games over 500 when he is in the lineup. So there's no way to sugarcoat this. This is a bad thing for the New York Yankees, even with the fact that they've been able to get back to a tie at first place in the American League East with the Tampa Bay Rays. The things that help them right now is the fact that you look around this American League And let's face it, I don't think we're breaking any news here by saying the American League sucks. You have only 5 of the 15 teams with records over 500. The Rays, the Yankees, the Guardians, the White Sox, surprisingly, and the Seattle Mariners have gotten back up above 500 after what was a really dismal start to the season for them. You have a couple of teams that are kind of dancing around that region, with the Rangers a game under, the Blue Jays 2 under, but they're dealing with a lot of pitching injuries. The A's got off to a hot start, but now they've sunk 3 games under 500, and the Baltimore Orioles have dealt with a lot of injuries and are still only 4 games under 500. But the American League is not going to run away from the Yankees. Hell, the Rays, who were the hottest team in the sport for a month, went 32-10 over a 42-game span. They've started to calm down. The last 2 weeks, they're 3-10, including last week losing 5 out of 6 against the Tigers and the Marlins. So the league is not going to run away from the Yankees. The division is not going to run away from them. But they do need some things to work out in their favor if they want to win the division, want to come out of the American League, and want to just put themselves in a position where they don't have to just go completely unconscious the moment he comes back. And who knows when that's going to happen. Everybody heals at a different rate, at a different pace, and especially as a big guy like himself, you want those ribs to be 100% when he does come back. You don't want him trying to rush things to be Superman here. You want it to essentially be the equivalent of making a mid-season trade when you get Aaron Judge back. And it's going to take more than just Ben Rice having an MVP level season, or Cody Bellinger. His season started to come on, but you'd like to see him actually start hitting well on the road compared to just feasting off his home success. You start to see some signs of good things from Jazz Chisholm. You're still getting nothing out of the catcher position. Third base, been kind of meh. I mean, McMahon had a good month of May, but still not saying much as he's barely over 200. And Ahmed Rosario, they've kind of put it in a platoon position there. Volpe's come back down to earth after everybody getting way too excited about his first 10 days up with the team. What's going to take is some of these people coming back here, whether it be Giancarlo Stanton, who could be back in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Who knows if they're going to let him play the outfield. And that's a crucial thing here. If he can play the outfield even 2 days a week, because Paul Goldschmidt has become a crucial part of this team. A lot during this time with Stanton on the IL, you've seen Goldschmidt and Rice trading off days of who's playing first base and who's playing DH. You don't want Goldschmidt, who's gotten off to a good start offensively, just to go back to being an irrelevant player on this team. You'd like to figure out ways to keep his bat in the lineup. And I don't think that's going to come from all of a sudden Rice putting on the catcher's gear and going behind the plate again. I think there's a concern that he would take a hit off the beating it takes playing catcher, and his offense wouldn't be as strong as it's been so far this season. So Stanton's going to be a crucial part of this. Another crucial part of this is someone who began a rehab assignment over the weekend, and that's Jason Dominguez. And it's really now or never time when it comes to Jason Dominguez. I've always been a fan of this kid's talent, but for one reason or another, it's just never fully hit here. Whether it be the injury a week into his rookie season, or it be when he finally did heal up, you had too many outfielders here and they wanted him to play every day. Or last year, what is proven to be somewhat of a flukish season by Trent Grisham pushing him to the bench. One reason or another, Dominguez has not had that full opportunity to take off here. And now's the time to see if he can do that. Now's the time to see if he can be a guy for this team and get going. Once he comes back in, say, the next 10 days, you pencil him in the lineup every day for 2 months and you say, all right, kid, let's go. Let's see what you've got. Let's see if you can be a driving force for this team in staying alive and remaining a contender while our captain is out. Because the pitching is going to hold up. This rotation has been awesome. Garrett Cole been really good in his first 3 starts back. You're starting to see some positive signs from Carlos Rodon. Cam Slittler has been one of the best pitchers in baseball. And then when it comes to Warren and Weathers, they've both been solid. Have had their bad starts, mostly Weathers, and had their really, really good starts. But one of those guys, when hopefully a month from now you get back Max Fried, is likely going to go to what I still consider the weakest spot on this team, and that being the bullpen. Something that they're going to look to upgrade before the trade deadline, and you hope some of those upgrades can come from within, whether it be moving a Weathers out there to the bullpen, or bringing up this kid, Giovanni Cruz, or what they finally did last week, which I've wanted them to do for a while now, and convert their 23-year-old flame-throwing pitching prospect, Carlos Legrand, to a relief role down in AAA, where you hope that, hey, if you're old enough to get this reference, you hope that he could be this year's Jabba Chamberlain, where he can come upon the scene and be a dominant force out of that bullpen. Yeah, their bullpen ERA is okay at right around 3.5, but they don't get a lot of strikeout. Outside of Fernando Cruz, there isn't a lot of guys that come out of that bullpen that you can ask to get a strikeout that you truly trust. So it's going to take a whole team's effort to pick up the slack that you're missing without Aaron Judge. But this team can still be an effective team and likely will still be in the mix of things, in the thick of things when he comes back, hopefully by no later than mid-August.
I'll be back.
It's always interesting seeing how things work out on a week-in, week-out basis when recording this podcast, because it always seems like some big news breaks immediately before the podcast starts, as it did last week when the Myles Garrett to the Rams news broke, or immediately after I click the stop button and I'm in the midst of editing the podcast, some big news comes out. And the news that we had long been waiting for, long been expecting, finally came out after last week's podcast, that being A.J. Brown being traded from the Philadelphia Eagles to the New England Patriots. Not exactly the package in return that I was expecting. I figured that the Eagles would get a first-round pick for next year's draft rather than having to wait for 2028. And along with it, they got a 5th-round draft pick for the 2027 draft. But it's not the worst return in the world. And it's a great deal for the Patriots as they get a true number 1 wide receiver in A.J. Brown, who fills the gap left by Stephon Diggs, who they cut ties with after last season, adds to that wide receiver room that they've been revamping over the offseason between this move and the signing of Romeo Doubs. And have a kind of a differing attack there, whereas Brown's a true perimeter threat. Dobbs is more of an interchangeable receiver who can move around different formations and take some pressure off of a room that you look at and you say, before that, not the most impressive room in the world, with Mac Hollins, Kayshon Boudier, Demario Douglas, Kyle Williams. So these are greatly needed upgrades, especially for a Patriots team that surprised a lot of people last year. And people knew that the Patriots were going to take steps forward. When you bring in a coach like Mike Vrabel, it's expected that you're not going to be a bad team, that you're going to be, at worst, a competent team. But no one expected them to be the 2 seed in the AFC and go all the way to the Super Bowl. It does help that they had a fairly easy schedule to get there, but they're not going to be sneaking up on anybody this coming season. They had won the division over the Bills last year. You're going to have a much tougher schedule this year, including starting off with 4 teams that were in the postseason last year, the first of whom is the defending Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks on opening night. So you want to have this roster as strong as can possibly be. And no one's expecting you to go 14-3 once again and be the 1 or 2 seed. But you want to take steps in roster building so that you remain a threat in not just the division going up against the Bills, but a threat in an AFC, which is going to be even tougher next year. And you've got 3 legitimate teams out west with the Broncos, the Chargers, and the Kansas City Chiefs, who will have Patrick Mahomes back probably at the latest end of September. You've got the Texans in the South, who are always a feisty bunch there. So this AFC is not going to be any cakewalk. And that's not even mentioning the North, who had the Steelers win the division last year and are looked at as the 3rd best team in that division. And for the Eagles, they put themselves in a position with the moves they made in the offseason, including drafting Mekhi Lemon, where, yeah, it hurts losing a talent like A.J. Brown, but you knew this was coming. You knew that this divorce was on the way with how fragile the relationship had seemed for the last year. Yeah, he was a phenomenal player for them, was a big part of them getting to 2 Super Bowls in a 4-year span and winning one of them against the Chiefs. Probably should have won both of them. But with how their offense was constantly changing the last couple of years, even during that Super Bowl season, he had become kind of a passive-aggressive pain in the ass with some of his cryptic tweets on social media, or the shirts that he would show up wearing on game day with different messages on them, even seen at one point on the sidelines reading a book during a game. And it was probably just too much for Jeffrey Loria and company to want to continue to deal with anymore. So he gave instruction to Howie Roseman to say, it's time to move on. So we'll see how this plays out for both teams, but it was desperately needed for the Pats and the wide receiver room. And the Eagles, now there's no more cover-up. There's no more excuses for Jalen Hurts. You got the biggest noise out of that room. You've had constant changes at offensive coordinator in the last couple of years, whether it be firings or guys getting opportunities at head coaching opportunities. There's no one to take the finger of blame from being pointed at you now. And you've got to step up with this team of Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley, and seemingly a whole new group of weapons around you. See what you can do, bro. Now, when it comes to the NFC, and I'm probably not breaking any news here. I'm probably not sounding any different from what the popular belief is right now. But early prediction is the LA Rams are going to win the Super Bowl. And I'm not just saying that because they are going to have the chance to host the Super Bowl at SoFi Stadium once again this coming year. That roster is stacked. Got Matthew Stafford coming off of winning an MVP last year. You just got Myles Garrett last week. And now there's rumblings of it becoming even more difficult to deal with the Rams. I've always been one of those people that believes where there's smoke, there's fire. Aaron Donald, people, is coming back to play for the Los Angeles Rams. I mean, you started hearing the rumblings last week, even despite him and his wife putting out that social media post of him sleeping on some family trip or something. After that trade was made, Pat McAfee tried reaching out to Aaron Donald, and his response was, it for sure got me thinking. He even hinted at this as early as before last season when there was rumblings about the Rams being in business to go get Micah Parsons, that maybe he'd consider coming back. But now you're bringing in the most dominant edge rusher in the league over the last 10 years. And Aaron Donald, let's face it, he didn't retire because of injury. He retired out of his own choice. He's had 2 years to rest up his body, even though he's done a lot of things in his post-football life, including starting a podcast of his own, The Inner Circle. He's stayed in remarkable shape. We constantly see him posting workout videos all the time. And wouldn't it be the most spike the football moment of all time if this guy who had retired 2 years ago decides to come out of retirement, even if it's mid-season comes out of retirement? Because I'm not going to believe that Aaron Donald does not play for the Rams this season until we get to that dead point. I think it's mid-November where you have to be on a roster to be eligible for the playoffs. But wouldn't it be something? He comes back. He already has one Super Bowl MVP on his resume. Comes back, helps lead the Rams to winning another Super Bowl in SoFi. Gets another Super Bowl MVP. Then is like, deuces, I'm out. I mean, that would just be, as I said, the most spike the football moment of all time. And we're talking about one of the most dominant defensive players, probably the most dominant defensive player of my lifetime. A guy that was a multi-time defensive player of the year, had over 111 sacks over the course of his 10-year career. Add him to a defensive line that now has Myles Garrett and Kobe Turner. This Rams team looks like it could be very, very special. It would surprise me if there's anyone out there not picking them to come out of the NFC, and would be even more surprising to me if Aaron Donald is not playing for them this coming season. And that, my friends, is Keeping It Sports with M3 for Monday, June 8th, 2026. Everyone, please have a great night. Have a fun, safe, happy, healthy week. Remember, folks, you got one life, so you might as well try to live it up to the fullest, especially you Knicks fans. And I'll talk to you guys again, same time next week. Until then, peace.
We have to go. Good night, everybody. I have had enough of you. Thank you for all the fun. Thank you. Hey, shut up, will ya?
I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear you. I don't want to smell you. Now leave. I'll be back.